Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at how artificial intelligence is moving into one of the most delicate and, frankly, high-stakes areas of medicine there is, the very personal quest to start a family.
You know, for some people, this journey starts with a really tough diagnosis, one that for a long time basically closed the door on the dream of fatherhood. But that might be changing, because AI is offering a completely new kind of hope. So let's dive into what we're really talking about here. This is a condition that affects up to 15% of infertile men, and it was once seen as a definitive end to having biological children. It's called non-obstructive azoospermia, or NOA for short. And what it means is that sperm production has, for the most part, failed. But here's the twist. It's not always a total failure. Research has shown that even with NOA, you can have these tiny, isolated pockets of sperm production. Think of them like little islands, still active inside the testes. The big problem? None of those sperm can get out on their own.
Right now, the best shot is a microsurgical procedure called micro-TESE. Surgeons go in and carefully dissect the testicular tissue, looking for tubules that just look healthier, the ones that are more likely to contain sperm. But finding that tissue, that's really only half the battle. The real search, the really hard part, happens next, under a microscope. So once that tissue gets to the lab, an embryologist has to start this absolutely grueling hunt. They manually break up the sample and then spend hours, literally hours, staring through a microscope, trying to sift through a whole sea of other cells, blood, and gunk. Experts call this process tedious and cumbersome. It's a task that completely relies on a person's stamina, their expertise, and honestly, a little bit of luck. And that subjectivity, that physical and mental drain, it brings us to a really critical question. In a search this important, where finding a single cell can change everything, could a machine actually do it better? And this, right here, is where the story gets really interesting.
Okay, so how in the world do you teach a computer program to find something so incredibly rare? Well, it all starts with showing it what to look for, again and again and again.
To get the AI trained up, scientists feed it thousands and thousands of microscope images from real patient samples. Then, expert embryologists have to go through and painstakingly draw little boxes around every single sperm they can find. What they're doing is creating a massive annotated dataset. This teaches the AI, a type of deep learning model built for image recognition, to spot the unique visual signature of a sperm cell, even when it's buried in all that other cellular noise.
So what happens when you pit one of these AI models against a human expert? Well, the results from the early studies are, wow, they're pretty astonishing.
One recent study did just that. It put an AI tool in a direct head-to-head challenge with a trained embryologist, and they were looking at two simple things. How fast can you find a sperm, and how many of them can you actually find? For the human expert, as you'd expect, the process is very careful, very meticulous. On average, it took them just over 36 seconds of pure, focused attention to locate and confirm each individual sperm. Now, check this out. The AI model did the exact same task in an average of just 0.02 of a second. We're not talking about a small improvement here. This is thousands of times faster. What takes an expert more than half a minute, the machine does in literally the blink of an eye. And here's the kicker. The AI isn't just faster. It's also more thorough. It found almost 92% of the sperm available, while the human expert found about 86.5%. Now, that small percentage difference might not sound like a lot, but in this search, it is absolutely critical. It's not just about being quick, it's about making sure no hope gets left behind. But what does all this speed and accuracy actually mean for patients? Well, in a follow-up pilot study, the impact was huge. Using AI to help the search led to 3 live births, in cases where the human-only search had found nothing. This is the moment the technology goes from being a cool experiment to a potentially life-changing tool. Okay, but before we get too carried away, we need a serious reality check. This is where the other side of the debate comes in. The potential is massive, for sure, but the road to actually using this in a clinic every day is full of challenges. The simple truth is that all of these promising tools are still in their infancy. We're talking about experimental models here, often trained on small sets of data from just one clinic. They don't have large-scale validation, they don't have regulatory approval, which means they are definitely not ready for prime time. And beyond just the technical stuff, there are some big practical questions we have to answer, Could an AI trained on data from one group of people be less effective for another? What happens if it misses the one and only viable sperm? Who's on the hook for that?
The clinic? The developer? And maybe most importantly, how do we make sure patients really understand what they're signing up for when there's no long-term data on the outcomes?
So, right now, the consensus in the research community is pretty clear. This is not about replacing human experts. The goal is to give them a powerful new tool to augment their abilities, let the machine do the tireless, boring scanning, and free up the human embryologist to make the final critical decisions.
So, this all brings us back to our big question. But maybe it's the wrong one. Maybe the future of fertility isn't about machine versus human. Maybe it's about a new kind of partnership between them, a collaboration that could transform that agonizing search for a needle in a haystack into a mission with real, tangible hope.